Welcome to the Aquest podcast. This is a special edition. Conversations with and for the Irish authorised funds industry with your host, Daniel Lawler. This episode specifically is inspired by Funds Ireland MiniCon, a virtual conference taking place week commencing the 2nd of November 2020 and for the funds industry. CP86, the final chapter, transforming challenge into best practice. RSVP over at www.fundsirelandminicon.com.
Hello and welcome to the Aquest podcast with me, Danny Lawler. If you're new to the Aquest podcast, do hit the subscribe button on your preferred podcast provider to keep up to date with all of the latest content. This episode of the Aquest podcast is part of our MiniCon series. So Funds Ireland MiniCon takes place in the first week of November. It is free to attend, and believe it or not, there's an enormous free virtual goodie bag worth, at this stage, over €2,000 for everybody in the audience. All you gotta do is register and attend at least one of the sessions, and you get your hands on this amazing free goodie bag. To register, check out fundsirelandminicon.com, and it's pretty straightforward there. Hit the RSVP button, and you're in. Get your hands on the goodie bag. So the first day of the Funds Ireland MiniCon, which is on the Monday, the 2nd of November, we're going to be talking about the regulatory landscape and we're going to be setting the scene for what is required of Irish mancos. Session 2 is on Tuesday, the 3rd of November, and it's going to bring on the conversation, moving on to looking at CP86 solutions, staff up or go third party. So for this podcast, I'm joined by one of the co-hosts of that second session, Nicola Gerety from AMX. And so I wanted to get from Nicola a sense for what's going to be on the agenda for that second session, that CP86 solutions session. And so we chat about the options open to legacy mancos, really, the mancos that are around a little while, that have very different models in terms of staffing and substance, and where they're going to change that model and get up the curve to something closer to what new mancos are. Their options are third party or staff up, in a nutshell. So we look a little bit about the types of questions that firms have when they're looking at the third-party manco model and where their concerns are and where their focus is. Then we talk about the staffing up option and some of the challenges and benefits of going down that route as well. All on the agenda for that session on the 3rd of November. We do talk about the demonstrable value. So how do both third-party or in-house mancos demonstrate that they're adding value to the funds and to the investment managers that they're working for. All on the agenda for that session on CP86 Solutions at Funds Ireland MiniCon on the 3rd of November. So let me shut up on this intro piece and let you guys get on with the podcast. Thanks again to Nicola for her insights. Make sure you register for Funds Ireland MiniCon at fundsirelandminicon.com. Catch you later. Hello, Nicola Gerety, and welcome to the Aquest podcast. I understand this is your podcasting debut.
It is indeed, Danny.
Well, it's great
An avid listener, but not a partaker.
I'm glad to hear it. I know you're based in London. How has lockdown in London been?
It's not been so bad, I guess, because there's been an easing off. I mean, I was supposedly basing myself in London and Ireland, which hasn't quite happened since I started at AMX, but it's been fine. I think since things have eased, everyone's getting back to some form of normality.
Yeah, I know, it's gradual. And you
it is.
Next during all of this fun and game.
I did. Would you believe I joined in February 24th, and I was in the office for 3 weeks. So I did get to meet some of my colleagues, and then we went to working from home. So yeah, an interesting start in the business, but you know, when everyone's in the same boat, Danny, everyone was working from home. Everyone had an understanding, I suppose, that we were all learning and working in very different environments. So yeah, I think the fact that we were all in the same position really helped in some ways.
Oh, I think it did. When it comes to things like somebody having difficulty getting onto a webinar or getting onto a video conferencing, or when the kid walks through the back or comes in looking for a drink of juice or something like that. I think because we're all in the same boat, there's a lot more focus and understanding for something like that than there may have been if, you know, a year ago, let's say.
Absolutely. I think, we all laughed years ago when we saw the footage of the reporter for the BBC and his kids flying into the room on the walker and all the rest. And that's become a norm now. I mean, that was something that happened and we thought, wow, God, that was such a thing to happen live on television. And now we're used to that. That's part of life these days as we're all adjusting to the new norm.
That's it. That's it. I tell you, you're an avid podcast listener. Outside of the Aquest podcast, have you any recommendations for our listeners?
Do you- I'm probably more of a listener to podcasts on a personal basis. So I'm big into fitness. So I listen to a guy called James Smith, who very much demystifies a lot that goes on in the fitness industry. But I'm also very much into leadership, and I listen a lot to Brené Brown. I don't know if you're familiar with her, Danny,
Yeah.
but she talks a lot about vulnerability, daring greatly, and I suppose today I'm hoping in this podcast that will demystify some things about CP86, but also that other people will say that we're daring greatly here.
Oh, what a wonderful segue. You're a natural, Nicola.
I know. Sure, I had to start somewhere, Danny.
So well, I wanted to chat to you mostly about MiniCon, Funds Ireland MiniCon, on in the first week of November. And
Yep.
yourself and Owen, Motherway and AMX, you're leading the second session of the Funds Ireland MiniCon, which
We
is
are indeed.
the 3rd of November, starting at 2 p.m. Irish time. And that session is really about CP86 solutions, staff up or third party is kind of the running title for that at the moment. So broadly, what can people expect from staff up or go home, staff up or third party session?
Well, I suppose, look, Owen is great at covering the different options that are available to people at the moment. Be it, leave the domicile, which we don't want, or set up their own manco, or perhaps go down the third-party manco route. And we're going to go through all of the different options. What I really want to cover a lot, though, is really helping people to identify the manco which is best for them as an investment manager. And I think that's where I guess for me, I feel that there's something lacking there right now in terms of helping managers to get their heads around this, to really develop that kind of due diligence process and helping managers to make an informed decision in this space. And I suppose many investment managers are looking at this, and perhaps a lot of us are maybe saying they should have grasped the nettle sooner. I know that's one of your terms, Danny, but for many, they're navigating on chartered waters, and they've appointed other types of service providers before, be it administrator, lawyer, auditor, but they haven't gone down this road. So it's very new. So
It's true, yeah.
And I feel that, even for me coming into this space, joining AMX and looking at third-party mancos and, what's out there at the moment, I had an interesting comment from a 9Ed recently saying, that's the boring stuff, Nicola. What else is there to talk about? Everyone's talking about substance. Everyone's talking about the same things. Can we just peel back the layers a little bit? And that's really what I'd like to do at the conference is really kind of strip this down and say, look, what are the questions that you need to be asking here?
Yeah. And I guess the context for all of this is the CP86 review, as we record, it has been completed. We're awaiting the DRCO letter. We expect it in the next couple of weeks. Personally, I expect that it will be the opportunity used by the regulator to pin those legacy mancos and self-managed investment companies that are around for a little while and have a staffing and resourcing model that's very different and much less onerous than what you would see if a new firm came along today. And to close that gap, I think that the regulator will use this DRCO letter as the opportunity to pin it to those legacy mancos and SMICs to move on and up their resources. So when they do that, there's a couple of options open to them. One of them is staff up, obviously, and one of them is the third-party manco. So these conversations, I think they've been going on in broad terms or in loose terms for a while, but I think that's going to, the ante is going to be up significantly, and rather than it being a side conversation or general, it's going to actually be down to business. And I know to mancos, or to legacy mancos, when I speak to them and we talk about options, we talk about third-party mancos, some firms, you'd hardly get the words out of your mouth, and it's just not a model that they're interested in. And others
Yeah.
that are much more open to it. So when you talk to firms and they,
Yeah.
managers, and they've got a legacy arrangement that they need to look again at the resourcing model. What are the top questions they have around? Am I going to go down this third party route? What are the kind of things that they don't know, or they want to know more about?
Yeah, I suppose some of the top items, I suppose, that hit the agenda is, when they start to weigh up, setting up my own manco versus the third party manco. And, I suppose there's a number of different challenges or questions that come up. The first is really, how long would it take me to actually set something like this up if I was to build my own versus appoint a third party manco? And it's not a quick route building your own manco. You're looking at 9+ months, and that's not even bringing into account, staffing and building a relationship with the CBI and the build cost involved, regulatory capital. So I think when managers start to even just, as I say, peel back the layers, there are so many different elements to this that sometimes picking something off the shelf seems like a much more worthwhile option. So the types of things that we cover really are helping them to understand the types of costs involved, helping them to understand that, you do need sufficient capital in place based on the assets under management. You do need sufficient staffing. There is that expertise that's required as well, because let's face it, Danny, the regulatory environment and the challenge now is that there's a lot more scrutiny of substance. There's a lot more capital requirements. There's a lot more internal controls required. And it's very difficult for investment managers to stay on top of all of this. So once they kind of get their heads around, what do I need to do? Then it becomes, is this really a road that we want to go down from, even a management perspective, but also a cost perspective?
So if they migrate to a third party, what kind of, is that a reasonably easy process? Is that a kind of okay, there's paperwork involved, but is it a play type thing? How long does it take? Is it reasonably straightforward to do?
It's reasonably straightforward. It takes 1 to 3 months. One of the things that we want to do at this MiniCon is we actually want to go through a case study of a multi-billion manco that we actually brought on board this year, Danny. And what we do is we go through a four-phase approach. The pre-launch, the design, as in the exchange between all the different stakeholders, the build itself, and then the launch. So really breaking down what needs to be done, but it's a very, very simple process, and in comparison to setting up your own manco, very, very seamless.
And tell me this, one thing that I always get asked is around costs. So how do you assess costs where you go down this route of a third party manco? And is that the first thing that you get asked, or is that later into the conversation? Because it certainly usually comes up earlier rather than later when I talk to clients.
As in pricing for manco, Danny. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people do ask about pricing, and and I think this is one of the things that investment managers are looking at. Obviously, the different options. It's a lot cheaper to go down the third-party manco route. Let's face it, because we have the staffing in place, we have the platforms in place to make this work, the technology, etc. So the cost is not even comparable to what you'd go through. I mean, we talk about setting up your own manco can be anything from 3 million plus, whereas we're talking about fees that are very, very different when you're looking at it in the third party manco space.
Right, and so let's just talk then about the other option here. So setting up your own manco or staffing up an existing manco and adding resources to it. I guess first thing you're thinking about is, well, staff. Where am I going to get them? How many do I need? Is there a pool of talent there that I can drop on? Are they all already occupied? So I know that's a part of what you guys will be talking about in the session at MiniCon, this element of the labour market.
Yeah. I mean, look, when you're staffing up, we all know that you need your 6 designated persons, but it's also a question of expertise, having the right substance there. And I think this is one of the areas that's going to be the area that probably evolves the most, because substance, has meant different things to different people over this period of time. We've got people who are hiring out DPs who qualify that as substance, and I feel that that story is not going to be a story that's going to be played out going forward. So, when investment managers are looking at substance, they're really looking to get a management company that is structured in the right way, that doesn't have conflicts of interest, that has genuine substance in terms of staff and expertise.
Yeah, and I think if you're a firm looking at the staffing up route, I think you're right on the secondee front. I think it's a model that gets put under a lot of pressure, where the time commitment is increased substantially from, if you're multiplying it by 10, then it brings a lot of challenges both to the provider of the secondees in terms of having enough people to go around to do all of this, give all these time commitments, and having right people. So I can see there'd be challenges there. But even
Absolutely, and a war for talent really as well,
yeah,
because everyone's looking for good people, but when the good people are already in place at a third party manco, then you're off to a flying start. But if you are going out there looking for people at the moment, it's not going to be a question of quantity, it's going to be a question of quality.
yeah, and that's a challenge. So I know you're going to cover that in the session on
Absolutely.
looking at that option of staffing up. And then there are other challenges, like even in the work from home, you'll be looking at what your office arrangements will be a little bit down the tracks when we get back to something that is more office based. Might impact on your capital requirements if you're moving from a self-managed investment company to a manco, even an in-house manco. But having said that, that will be the right option for some firms.
It will. It will. And look, we've already seen that already. Some firms have gone down that route. They've set up their own manco, and that's a decision that's right for them, but it won't be right for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. There's like everything, cost and benefit. There's certainly costs there, but if you're a larger player, let's say, and you want the brand on your own manco and the control and everything that gives you, then that's going to be right for some firms.
Exactly.
So I guess the last thing, or one of the other things that's going to be covered in your session at MiniCon, is around demonstrable value and
Yes.
how mancos demonstrate that they're worth what they're charging, or that they're doing something that adds value to the proposition for the investment manager. What can you tell us about that topic?
Well, I suppose one of the questions when we start to talk to investment managers, and it's always my starting point when they're trying to make a decision as to where they want to go, what type of third-party manco they're looking for, or who the provider should be, should I say. But for many, it'll just simply come down to relying upon the skills and expertise of organizations who have that technical experience. And perhaps they're just looking to leverage off established market providers already located in Ireland. And that's great. For others, I suppose, there's going to be a bigger picture to this. And for many fund groups now, I guess they're realizing that there'll be a benefit to centralizing some of their functions to create economies of scales, maybe looking at more of a one-stop shop for all of their fund requirements. And I suppose a big part of what we're thinking about when we're talking to investment managers is some of these add-ons, or what we call at AMX future optionality. And that's really thinking about what are the wider strategic benefits of partnering with the right manco provider. And I suppose creating a significantly wider opportunity set. And I suppose where some management companies will be able to demonstrate value for money is that they're not only providing the substance, the skill base, the stability that is required of them from a regulatory perspective, but they'll also be able to have, I guess, this future optionality or add-on of a distribution, maybe that key differentiator that's out there in helping clients to market their products or gain access to particular countries or regulators, and then also maybe tax, other areas that they might want to expand on in the future. So it's really that kind of add-on perspective in terms of what else is there that I can tap into that I might need in growing my fund management platform in the future.
Yeah, and we all know that price is what you pay and value is what you get. And I just wonder how much of that value conversation there is now and how high that is up on the list of things that investment managers want to talk to and get a handle on. And my assumption is, you can prove me wrong
Yeah.
here, that with the work in the UK on value for money, that it is having a little impact in terms of being something that, whereas it may have been in the background, is now something further up and further to the front of the minds of investment managers. So are value conversations something that happen all the time when investment managers come to look at the options available to them?
Mm-hmm. I think it's happening a lot more now, and I can certainly say, we have been doing a number of meetings over the last few months with, a lot of our esteemed colleagues in Ireland, and service providers, and also, investment managers that are finding themselves in this position. And some of, I suppose, surprisingly for me, when I first started doing the meetings, was the biggest question was, what else is on offer? Is distribution available? Are these other items on the agenda? So it's definitely on the table, Danny, and it's definitely there for discussion. So it's not a case of, just pricing anymore and just the basic services.
Yeah, and I guess part of that then is understanding, how does the fund management company do things like oversee delegates? How involved in that? And is that something then that really adds to my, as the investment manager, my compliance framework, or where does that land?
Yeah.
So I was going to say, if you are in the space of an in-house manco, a capital manco, you're setting up or you're staffing up your own manco, value for money is incredibly important there as well, or particularly if you're going to be the staff in that management company. I think when I deal with those type of mancos, the ones that always impress me most are the ones where the leadership team in the new manco, or the captured manco, are very conscious of the need to add value to the group. Because if that staffed up manco is just a compliance solution or a Brexit play for the organization, then you can imagine when there's a better Brexit play or a better compliance solution, the need or the desire to have that company, we know that they're costly, starts to come under pressure. So where I see the best of those in-house mancos is where they're very conscious of doing more than just being a compliance solution, and looking to see how can we contribute to the overall business. And maybe that's pulling the compliance business and being the center of excellence on compliance, or distribution oversight, or distribution management, or whatever it is. But even where it is, as I said, a bespoke, a capture manco, an in-house manco, you really need to have value as somewhere pretty close to the top of your list to make sure that you're doing something that adds to the group, and that you're not the first to be caught when there's a better compliance solution.
Absolutely. And I think, Owen will probably cover a lot of this as well, in terms of, the reg tech and the investment in that, and obviously that evidence of challenge, adding value all the time to the process as well. So that there'll be a lot of different elements to value, not just from, maybe a distribution perspective, but as you say, in-house also, what are they adding to the process?
So it sounds like there's tons of content for your session on the 3rd of November, Tuesday, 3rd of November, 2 p.m. How are
We
you
do.
all? 2 hours, I think you have.
Serving time.
Good stuff. Well, let's wrap it up there. Great to have you on the podcast, Nicola. Well done. First one out of the way. And I think it sets up very nicely the attendees at the MiniCon to understand in this session what they can expect. Good bit of discussion around the structuring options available to these legacy mancos and SMICs, and then a case study to really understand what they would let themselves in for if they went down the route of a third party. But then also you're going to be looking at the staffing up option as well, and what the labor market looks like, and what it's going to cost, and what the available talent is. So tons in there.
Exactly. I mean, it's really going to be a great starting point for anyone who is looking at this and really wants to get a grasp of what does it actually entail. So we will be very much looking forward to the event and to providing that information.
Cool. Well, listen, anybody who isn't yet registered, do register to attend Funds Ireland MiniCon. Registration is free even. There's an amazing free virtual goodie bag for anybody who registers and attends. So get your hands on that. You check out fundsirelandminicon.com to register, and also subscribe to the podcast so that you are notified when the other podcasts in the series are dropped that give you an insight into the other sessions coming along at Funds Ireland MiniCon. In the meantime, let me wrap it up there. Let me thank Nicola again for guesting on this episode of the Aquest podcast. We'll catch you next time.
You've been listening to the Aquest podcast, a special edition. Conversations inspired by Funds Ireland MiniCon. RSVP at www.fundsirelandminicon.com. For more information about Aquest or Daniel Lawler, visit www.aquest.ie.